So today we're discussing the potential tax implications of the ETH merge. The actual merge from proof of work to proof of stake didn't cause any inherent taxable events simply because it was a soft fork. It was a protocol change from the consensus mechanism of proof of work to proof of stake. So there wasn't any inherent new asset that was created or any reduction in compatibility with the ETH asset itself. So there was no actual taxable event that happened with the merge event itself. But today we're going to discuss some of the other kind of events around the merge that could create taxable events, including staking and staking rewards, the ETH proof of work hard fork, the treatment of liquid staking options like Lido's staked ETH or Rocket Pool's RETH, and any others that people want to bring up and discuss. So I just wanted to start off the conversation by talking a little bit about staking rewards, because IRS guidance on staking rewards is that they are income at the fair market value of at the time of receipt, right? So if that's the case for ETH and you have your ETH locked in the staking contract, those rewards are not available to you until the Shanghai upgrade, which is scheduled for March 2023. So if you've been staking ETH for a number of years and you've been earning rewards, by the IRS's definition of how this should be handled, you should be paying taxes on that ETH as you earn it, and i.e. as you generate those rewards. But you can't direct, sell, or you don't have any real dominion and control or constructive receipt of those assets because you don't have any way of getting an economic benefit of them from them because you can't do anything with them, right? They're locked in the staking contract. So in my mind, those aren't necessarily taxable rewards. I was hoping that our friend, the tax attorney, Andrew Gordon, would have been on this call just to talk to him a little bit about his opinion on that. But from my standpoint, thinking about it as there's no dominion and control over those assets, there's no constructive receipt. So in my mind, I wouldn't necessarily consider those ordinary income. Now, I'm not recommending that anyone take this position, but I'm just kind of highlighting a nuance that the IRS guidance doesn't really take into effect or into consideration. Another quick couple of things I wanted to talk about before we discuss this more openly is just things like the hard fork, the proof of work, ETH proof of work hard fork. So some miners decided to fork the ETH chain after the merge happened to maintain a proof of work Ethereum network. And as a result, they created a new network. And if you had ETH in a non-custodial wallet, you got basically essentially airdropped an equivalent amount of ETHW tokens. Now, if you have your ETH on a centralized exchange, some exchanges supported the ETHW fork, others didn't. So there's a chance that you may or may not have a taxable event if you have ETH on a centralized exchange. But you'll need to log into your centralized exchange and see if you ever received ETHW. That stuff will be taxed as ordinary income at the time it was received at the fair value at the time of receipt. And then finally, liquid staking. In my opinion, things like Lido's staked ETH, where rewards accrue on, and you can claim them whenever you want. Any of those rewards, because you can claim them, they're liquid. Those would be ordinary income. On the flip side, Rocket ETH, Rocket Pool's RETH, the rewards are accrued into the price of RETH. So those would be no taxable event because it's accruing in the value and the price of that asset. So it'll just be a capital gain at the time of sale. So I kind of wanted to kind of open it up for discussion on what people think about my initial thoughts on the staking rewards conundrum with ETH staking rewards and how that impacts the taxability of those rewards when it comes to them being locked up until at least March 2023. So if anyone has anything they want to input, I'll open up the floor.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing new about this, even though crypto is new. We're talking about the court case is Glenshaw Glass, Commissioner versus Glenshaw Glass, 1955, and they pretty much define, you know, constructive receipt as an accession of wealth, meaning that you have the money and you can spend the money. If you can't use it, if you know what I mean, then you really don't have constructive receipt. It's pretty straightforward in my mind. I think, you know, you'd probably win in tax court if you wanted to take it there. Which
Yeah, and that's a good point. There was a tax court case. It was with regards to Tezos, but there wasn't an actual ruling because the IRS ended up issuing the refund. So I think the IRS kind of wanted to kick the can on this and not provide clear guidance on it, because if people decide they want to report their rewards, that's more cash revenue in Uncle Sam's pocket, right? They want that. So I think that it was a
punt.
Yeah. Well,
we don't want to. You know what?
Yeah.
Go ahead. You guys are good. You're good. Just leave us alone.
Yeah. Here's your little refund. You know, we won't make a decision on this. So I agree. I think that it would be. I think you would win in tax court. And now, don't quote me on this. This isn't financial advice. But this is just a open discussion among accounting and tax professionals. Me personally, I don't think you would have an issue with deferring these until they are available to you, right? So that's kind of the way I see it. And then with regards to things like the ETHW fork, I've heard people argue that that these rewards this airdrop necessarily wouldn't necessarily be ordinary income. I find that a bit more challenging to justify because it's listed on a lot of it's listed on CoinGecko. There's a price for it, and even if you never claimed it, it's still available to you. So the fact that you either are ignorant on the process of doing it or just refuse to claim it because you're worried about your wallet getting hacked, which is a legitimate concern, right? There was a relay hack that was happening with wallets where they could piggyback transactions, from what I understood. A little bit too technical for my pay grade, but essentially, if you access those rewards, there was a chance that someone could hijack your wallet and send real ETH on top of that. So, yeah, for me, that's a little bit of a gray area too, because if you have a legitimate concern about claiming these rewards, but you still have to claim them as ordinary income, you know, how does that get navigated? I think that's an interesting one to think about as well.
I was just going to mention then, so this is really strange, right? Because effectively what you've got here is an asset for free. You've been airdropped something and it's kind of against your will, but you're right. You've got control over the asset. You can sell the asset. You can make a gain on it, right? But it's strange because it sounds like it's forcing you to pay tax up front. You're incurring a tax liability by entering your wallet, but because you can't refuse the transaction, it has to enter your wallet, and therefore you have to pay tax on it. So it feels, while I understand you get the gain, it does feel a little bit strange. And this is probably something we need to do in Web3. We need to build wallets in a way that where we can refuse tokens coming in, right? We all get enough spam tokens as it is, but when we're getting airdropped things, I mean, the question would be, for me, for example, I don't believe the ETH proof of work chain is going to be any good. So I wouldn't want those tokens in my wallet. I would just burn them, and get rid of them. But I would also incur a tax liability under the current way that it works. So it feels like there's something missing there that needs to be, there needs to be a way to refuse the tokens coming in to begin with.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that being able to refuse shitcoins, I have Direwolf token in my wallet that I've never interacted with, and there's a huge risk associated with trying to trade these tokens a lot of times too. If you tried to, there's a number of scams where if you try to sell them on a decentralized exchange, you can expose your wallet. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I've heard of people losing money from trying to redeem these shitcoins. And so if you can't redeem them in a safe way, I agree. There needs to be some sort of regulation that kind of exempts you from if you never claim an economic benefit from it via actually converting it to USD, unless, you know, something like the Uniswap airdrop, that one was a legitimate, but how do you determine what's legitimate and what's not? That's the tricky part. Yeah, go ahead.
Almost like if you don't opt in, it should be like you opt in. If you opt in to the airdrop, you recognize income at the fair market value at the time of the receipt. If you don't opt in, you don't recognize income until you have some economic benefit. But then the problem is people could use that as a way to have something of value come to them and not pay tax at the same time. So it's like a double-edged sword. And I don't know how you would address something like that.
Well, you know what? That's a good point to make, because the Uniswap airdrop, you had to actually claim it on the Uniswap website. So that's a clear distinction. You're opting in, you're actively going and claiming it because you see that it has an economic benefit. At the time when Uniswap airdropped it, it was 400 uni tokens and it was worth about $1,200 when you received it. So it was like, it wasn't nothing, you know, it was basically a stimulus payment, right? And yeah, so I guess it would be ideal if there was a way. I mean, I don't want to say ideal, because if you proposed an EIP that like disallowed airdrops unless you opt into them, that could create some other issues on chain. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing to think about. Mitch, did you have something you wanted to say?
Sorry.
Yeah, I think, you know, a great way to distinguish these two would be custody of the assets. And then part of it goes back to what we were discussing last week of, if you're just airdropped a random coin, right? I would say you would do a periodic analysis of all the crappy coins that are in your wallets and just say, you know, group it in with that and say, well, we don't think this is material and here's why. And kind of prove that out a little bit. But I think it's really a question of custody. You know, you liken this to a fiat bank account. If someone sends you a random currency to your bank account, right, you still have the access and the custody to it, even if you don't really want it or have the economic value from it. So I think it's kind of the same with an airdrop. You know, that's in essence what's happening, is you do have the economic benefit if it's in your control. And that's kind of something I've been thinking about relative to the topic as well, is if you're staking something, I think there's a clear difference in if you have the ability to pull it out or if the funds are frozen for a certain amount of days, right? I think that's a factor too that we should discuss and would probably influence this. So say it's locked for 2 years, right? I think that's crazy to have to pay taxes up front. Whereas if it's more liquid than that, I could see, you know, a different stance.
Right, exactly. There's a clear distinction too. I mean, when people talk about staking, but there's really very, very different types of staking, right? There's all these tokens that allow you to stake on their platform, whether it's for like crypto.com, you stake for 180 days, I believe, and you get extra yields, right? Better yields off of it. But like, those are locked up. So I can't touch those tokens for, you know, 180 days, you know, whereas if there's an unstake period, like the company I used to work for, TrustSwap, they had like a 7-day window where if you wanted to unstake, there was a kind of a gap there, right? So that, you know, and in those instances, I would think that if the rewards are available to you and you can claim those whenever, then yes, like you're saying. But again, it's a lot of this always comes back to what's the substance of it? What's, you know, put on your accounting theory hat and just say like, okay, can I direct these funds? Are they mine? Like, can I exchange these for USDC or ETH and then go spend them elsewhere, right? I think that's a thing to kind of look at. And one option that I've thought about is, I'm not sure if this works for all like ERC20 tokens, but I think that you can send tokens back to the contract address to burn them. If I think about this correctly, because you're effectively sending them to a null address, and so if you wanted to just clear out your shit coins, I think that that's a way to do it. Is you could just send them to the contract address. I don't know if that opens you up to any security risks or not. So, but that could be a solution for kind of zeroing out shitcoins. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so yeah, I agree, and I think I've been down that road, and I've asked a few people this question, and they say the same thing, that if you try to do that with a shitcoin, it can compromise your wallet and the other tokens. So for me, it just comes back to that piece that, you know, if you're not requesting the asset to enter your wallet, I mean, it feels like there needs to be something in there. I appreciate the control point. But yeah, if you interact with a shit token, or you try and send it to like the zero contract address, the security risk there is huge, I think. So there does need to be a way to be able to reject tokens that come into your wallet. There has to be a fundamental way to do it, because otherwise, I think you could literally just forever send shit coins to someone, and you know, it's a great way to do like a phishing scam.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And people, there's lots of success in that as well.
Let's say you go take a job with a U.S. corporation, and they issue you stock options, right? You don't have a choice but to accept the option if it's part of your job condition, but what is it worth? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In that case, go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say, in that example, though, you're agreeing to receive the stock options as part of your compensation. So in that, there are two parties involved in that transaction, whereas the ETH proof of work, there was only one party involved in that transaction. You weren't involved in it. You didn't request it or ask for it. It's the same with all the shit coins, right? So
yeah, good point. I was just
I think
I was trying to think of the illiquid portion of it. You know, if you get some stock option that really you can't do anything with, you know, how do you value it? As you said, I think the issue is whether you opt in or not, right? Did you say I agree to accept this asset? Like you can win $1 billion on a scratch ticket and decide not to cash it, I guess, right?
Yeah. Mitch, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to that point of having an annual assessment of everything in your wallet and looking through the non-material items that are within your wallet, because I agree that ideally there would be like a technological solution for that, but there currently isn't, right? If you own a MetaMask wallet and you're interacting with decentralized applications, you're going to get airdrop something at some point. And we all have that in our wallet. And ideally, those would still be tracked through whatever cryptocurrency accounting software you're using. And then through that, you can validate that there's not a clear market price and the amounts you're holding are not, really material to your company. And from that perspective, I would make the argument that I'm just not going to have a valuation on them and I'm not going to transact with them. And that can be a part of your thesis as well, is that you didn't actually accept the coins, they were just sent to you.
Well, what about somebody who grabs a wallet, right, and never uses it? You go get a MetaMask wallet, never use it again, and people start airdropping stuff into it. You don't even know what's in there, and you're going to be taxed on it.
That's true, but I think that the likelihood of, usually people find you from airdrops because of other protocols or other tokens that you hold, and they pull it from like the holders list. So generally when they're doing that, they're pulling on public data. And so if you don't have activity, but yeah, I see what you're saying is if you have low activity in a wallet and you get airdrop these tokens, and then the IRS, when they figure out how to track all this stuff in 5 years or so, they come after you, knocking on your door saying, hey, you received, 400 uni tokens and they were worth $1,200. Like, why didn't you? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it would be great if there was an EIP proposal for this to kind of force you to opt in to receiving. I don't know how that would work, but anyways, yeah, like Mitch's point, there is no way to refuse these at this point. So, and one last thing I want to say on this is that these projects can also falsify or manipulate the pricing, right? They could put a very stupidly small liquidity pool on Uniswap and forge a really dumb, like an irrelevant price. And if they have a quadrillion supply, and they have a $10 pricing because they made one trade on Uniswap or one trade on a sketchy centralized exchange, there could be a market price for it. But is that legitimate? And that's why a lot of these tax offers, they pick up like totally irrelevant values for a lot of these shit coins, is people manipulate the price so that it looks like you got something worth value. So
And that's
yeah, go ahead.
That's what we talked about the last 2 weeks, right? Illiquid
Yeah.
shit coins, right?
Exactly.
And now
Yeah.
when you get illiquid shit coins for free, and you could almost argue the value, like prove to me that it's worth $1,200. I think it's worth $100 because nobody wants it, you know?
Yeah,
so,
exactly. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say, yeah, so Mitch, that's a really good point. So there's almost like there's an approach here that we're going to do going forward. So I completely agree with that. And then there's almost like an ideal that we almost want to like try to work towards, and appreciate that's not going to be like anytime soon. But I think liquidity needs to be factored into that ideal situation at some point, because the liquidity, as you were just touching on there, Taylor, like if it has no liquidity, you cannot withdraw it, even if it has that market price, right? There needs to be. It feels like that's a calculation, and I know we spoke about this a few weeks ago, but I do feel like we need to explore that more, because I feel like that's almost like a calculation that we could do, or there could be a DApp for that could cleverly work that out.
That's a good idea. Yeah, a decentralized app that kind of helps you value in real terms what, like based on the supply that you hold, right? Because it could factor in some of the traditional models that we talked about in a couple of weeks ago, but also look at what liquidity is there out there for this asset. Because if the project only has 5% of their supply in liquidity pools, and you have 1% of the supply because you helped incubate that project, like, yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think, that illiquid altcoin discussion, I think we'll have that again in a few months, because I think it's a constantly evolving thing, and I think it's a really interesting and important topic. Yeah, awesome.
The differences between trying to value a private company is very difficult, but when you're trying to value something on the blockchain, you can almost come up with the right algorithm to make sure it gets it right every time, based on the amount of stakeholders, how much they hold, how much is available and unavailable.
Yeah, that's a good point. Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit more about STETH, so Lido's staked ETH, and Rocket Pool's RETH, because those are some other assets surrounding it's not directly tied to the ETH merge, but with assets like STETH and RETH, there is some earning going on built into those assets, but they're treated very differently, because with STETH, you can log on to Lido's platform and you can claim whatever staked ETH whatever ETH rewards you've earned. So those are available to you as they're earned. So that, I think, is pretty cut and dry from a standpoint of, okay, that's going to be ordinary income to you, right? Whereas if you look at Rocket Pool's RETH, those rewards accrue within the RETH token. So the price of the RETH token increases over time, because not guaranteed, because the price of ETH overall could go down, so the price of RETH could go down, but relative to the price of ETH, RETH increases simply because the rewards pool within that asset. So in my mind, that would mean that when you purchase RETH, you have much more control over when you recognize the taxable event with RETH over STETH, because the rewards accrue within it, so that it's simply when you sell it is when you have that taxable event, rather than STETH where you're constantly accruing rewards. So I don't know if anyone had anything they wanted to weigh in on that, or if you see it similarly to me.
I think the way you described it was pretty much what I had in mind. You know, I think it's pretty hard to get around both of those if you have the custody to be able to pull it out. That the current guidance kind of says what it says, and we can agree with it or not agree with it, but I think that's the proper treatment.
Right. Someone in the group said the other day that, and I wanted to kind of get you guys' opinion on this. I'll pull it open real quick. Essentially, they were kind of likening it to chopping down trees, kind of similarly with like mining. They were equating it to chopping down trees, where you've chopped down the tree, but until you actually sell that log, you're not recognizing a taxable event. And I kind of see it differently. I kind of see it as like, no, I mean, it's very different, because when you mine Bitcoin, for example, when you have that mine, that's immediately available to you, and it's you can trade it for USDC. Whereas with a log, when you're a logging company and you cut down that tree, it's in your inventory because you have to do more to it. You have to put forth effort in order to offload that off of your balance sheet, right? And I think, yeah, they're using it as like kind of they're trying to draw an analogy between agricultural commodity and mining or staking rewards. And I think that would be a difficult case to make in my mind. I don't know what you guys think about that.
They tried it with baking bread too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing. They're saying like you bake the bread until you've sold it.
Yeah. I think that one's pretty cut and dry. It's at least from, you know, I mean, you could take that stance, and I think that you know, you might have luck with it, but I would say that you don't, once you have the Bitcoin in your wallet as a reward, or ETH in this case as a staking reward. Now, ETH is different because we can't direct those staking rewards, but if you don't have to put forth any other effort other than clicking send or executing a trade on exchange, to me that would be ordinary income as received. So for me, that one was kind of cut and dry, but yeah, that was the last kind of thing I wanted to bring up. I don't know if anyone has any final thoughts on this subject, or
I was just gonna talk about that really quickly, Taylor, because that's really interesting. Because you mentioned there the wood example. In the chopping down the wood example, the woods, you know, you chop it down, you have the wood, you can add it to your balance sheet. You know, the timber has a value, but it's not liquid, so you don't recognize it as cash. Whereas this is really strange. It's kind of unique, really, with crypto assets. There's normally a liquid market for it. So perhaps, you know, we need to consider them. Some of these tokens won't have a liquid market right now, and they will have a liquid market at a certain point in time. But obviously for ETH, there's obviously a hugely liquid market. So that makes your logic makes perfect sense, I think.
Right. I think that you know, like as an example, here in Costa Rica, we have an app called Bitcoin Jungle, and almost every single restaurant in the area, most of the vendors at the farmers markets, all accept Bitcoin. And so if I'm a miner and I receive Bitcoin, I can literally go down and I know this isn't necessarily the case in the States. You can't go down to any store and pay in Bitcoin, or I'm sure in the UK as well, it's probably a bit more challenging than this. But here, I can literally go to the farmer's market and I can buy the groceries that we need for the week with Bitcoin if I wanted to. So yeah, to me, it's cut and dry. I would say that that's a stance that I wouldn't take. You may try to make an argument for it, but I think to your point, Tom, if it's liquid and there's a market for it. Now, also to your point, if it's a random shitcoin that you're accruing, I mean, and you don't have any market to sell it, then maybe there's a case to be made that you would have to, I don't know, how would you put in effort to make that worth something? That's an interesting point. I'm not sure how that would be handled, but
yes, it's not straightforward, is it?
No. That's why we're here, right? Well, that's all that I had to discuss, and thank you guys very much for your input on this. Some of the next week we're talking about we have, I'm sorry, Stacey Ferris's contribution to the Journal of Accountancy. She is proposing and submitting her digital asset hierarchy. So this very well could determine how digital assets are classified and broken down into different subcategories. So could be a really great discussion. We've already started a slight discussion on it via the Crypto CFOs community. It's in the accounting section in the forums there. So if you want to weigh in there before the call, you can do so there. And I think it's going to be a really great discussion because we literally could be shaping how these assets are formally designated in the States, at least.
Yeah, if you're an AICPA member, you automatically receive a subscription to the Journal of Accountancy, and I think it's like 750,000 members. And then it's free online in addition to that. So it's kind of like the authority in the US of, like peer-reviewed articles that you can rely on. Like they'll never publish anything that's hasn't got through the scrutiny of, the top minds in accounting. So I mean, we get to participate in that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think that's it's going to be a great discussion, and really happy that she was willing to share that with us and bounce it off of us. So yeah, hope to see you guys there if you're available. And thanks again for joining.